This week on Great Chat, all the chatter among founders, employees, and the VCs in between us got us walking down memory lane. How did we get into tech in the first place? Banking, advertising, journalist? Our path to tech wasn't linear, and we'd talk about it all here. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Mercury, the fintech used by over 200,000 companies to simplify their finances. We're huge fans of Mercury at Great Chat, and we use it to run this podcast. A few of us are current customers for our funds and startups, not to mention the dozens of founders we've backed as VCs, angels, and scouts that run their businesses on Mercury. If you're launching a startup or fund, visit mercury.com to apply online in 10 minutes or less. The onboarding couldn't be more intuitive or delightful. Quick note, Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. For more details, check out our show notes.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, ladies. Hi. I feel like there's nothing else to talk about but the Coldplay concert. Or it's just plagued my timeline.
You know, the problem with AI is it's like really shortened the life cycle of the memes because there's just been such a proliferation that every possible combination has been played through.
Wait, have you seen good AI memes?
I've seen some incredible good AI memes.
Oh yeah, like the Trump and Hillary Clinton one.
Gotcha. Okay, yes. All right. I feel like the IRL memes have been hilarious. Like I've really enjoyed the Philly Fanatic, the sports ones where they're reenacting it like every ballpark. But yeah,
it's really brought the nation together.
I know it's weird.
I don't know if I should feel like. I don't know what the right emotion is, but in some of my group chats, there was like a big debate about whether or not the CEO would actually be asked to leave because it feels like we have moved so far past being sensitive to issues like this that it might just have been overlooked. But
one thing that was interesting on this one was like the first 24 hours on Twitter, the memes were like funny and yes, of course, at the expense of the two execs, but like they were funny and it felt lighthearted and fine. And you're part of this cultural moment. Yes, everyone feels united. And then you get on LinkedIn and it was people writing like 26 paragraph essays on like, you know, this is why we've got policy and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, whoa. You're the vibes here are off. Yeah. So it was such a stark contrast between like Twitter and LinkedIn for a very, you know, work sort of thing. And I saw that the former CEO tweeted last night. He's like, should I go on TMZ? Or something like that, where I'm like, you know, these moments where tech becomes part of like the national discourse or like something outside is always just so bizarre to me. But I was like, what? TMZ is, yeah.
No, my favorite was when people were like, was this all a marketing ploy so that people would know what astronomer is because nobody
definitely do now. Yeah. I mean, looked up the investors with their Series D and they've got an incredible list of investors and I'm sure they've got takes on it. But I don't know. I thought the company response was good and everything's been pretty clean. There are so many. Actually, the concerning part for me is that there are so many fake statements floating around, right?
That's what I was thinking about. Was like, for a while, even some of us we thought the fake press release was a real one.
Right.
I was thinking about how quickly news moves this day and age, and on top of that, you layer on the AI generated video, and so. Going down like a layer deeper, there was that VP of HR who people speculated was at the scene as well. And just imagine if you are that person who was thrusted into this like discourse where she wasn't even there, but everyone, the country was convinced that she was. I used to oversee our disinfo desk at NBC News, and we have to deal with a lot of doxing, and it's really scary how quickly people find out your personal information. They knew, you know, one of our employees where their children's school were. They were showing up to the children's school, so it does, you know, bring out some of the dark side of, you know, how a regular person can get sucked up into this like conversation. But yeah, it's been a wild. I don't know, 48 hours or 3 days of news.
Ellen,
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned like the CEO asking if you should go on TMZ. I feel like I had the same thought, other than like the head of HR is thinking she should reach out to Alex and call her daddy. Like this is her 15 moments of fame, and she should just write it for as long as she can.
Well, I mean, like, because I've been thinking about, like, what are the comeback stories for the CEO? Maybe there is none, but there probably is. I think I texted you guys. It's like, he's going to move to Miami and be, like, very big into crypto. And it'll be fine, and nothing happened. Or, like, where do you go from here? So I feel like the redemption arc is where, like, a call her daddy or something like that would be an interesting sort of
Or
tool.
like launch a podcast about dating or about in the new age.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know, something so extreme.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. We'll see.
one other thing that caught my eye this week was I don't know if you guys saw that Ted Sarandos, who's the co-CEO of Netflix, talking about the fact that they used AI in some of their films. Not surprising for me. I think it's inevitable. It's obviously a space I cover closely, but I don't know if you guys had any thoughts about that.
Well, for the uninformed like me, like where specifically is it showing up? Is it like for
Well,
like, video, like people acting?
yeah, the way that he described it was that it was for VFX, so a lot of the visual effects that you see, which again, not surprising, getting, tweaking some additional features here and there. But there was a Bloomberg article that came out a few days later where it said that Netflix is using Runway ML as a collaborator, and it also mentioned that Disney might also be starting to look at working with Runway as well. So this goes down a whole debate around which AI models that these film studios are going to use with the like ethically trained model providers that are out there. Disney and Universal Pictures, which is part of Comcast, recently sued Midjourney. So it's this friction between the legacy studios that and this rise in new technology that's going to fundamentally change a lot of the ways that the film is made. But
I wonder what the end game for all of this is. Is it just to lower costs? Is it to deliver more personalized content? Because part of the appeal of media is that one piece of content brings a lot of people together, and if the promise of AI is that you can star in your own movie, then it just becomes so siloed. I feel like we'll miss having these like water cooler moments or summer blockbusters that everyone is watching, even if it's not personalized just for them.
I mean, I personally think it's going to be like a new genre of like AI generated films, the same way that like the Blumfield low budget horror film is a category of film. This would be a category of film that's like AI generated content. And then just like overall studios are going to use various parts of AI for editing tools, but I don't think it's going to be like fully generated for the next Titanic or the next Avatar. I don't agree with that. I think it's going to be less exciting how AI is integrated into film than people might think.
Where my head went was whether one of these providers would position themselves as like the one that is, used and trusted because it's not, it's not rife with copyright issues, or they're compliant, or they're working in partnership with studios. Because I think a very unsexy but real way to stand out right now is for companies to position themselves as like the compliance first, sort of like there's one. Have you heard of Moon Valley?
Yeah, we invested in Moon
Oh,
Valley.
yeah. So Moon Valley, like I feel like they just their positioning is that they're like this, right? Like they do it in a copyright safe way, and there's a lot of like legal tech that I think also, as you can imagine, lead with that, and it's like, yeah, it helps you break through or differentiate.
Yeah, I think it's a debate of can you get the enterprises or the buyers of these products be comfortable with
Right.
using these AI tools?
Right,
And so
right.
Moon Valley is well positioned in that. Legal, obviously, a big one. Harvey using Claude, for example,
Yeah,
because they've used a more safe, ethical model.
right.
There's probably also just some like timing delta, right? Because right now AI, if you were to generate like a full clip, it probably can't be more than like 60 seconds. Like there's no AI model out there that can generate, even
Too
a
expensive.
TV series of like 30. I don't even know if the capability exists for that continuity to exist for like 30 minutes or 2.5 hours for a movie. And at the same time, you have the actors who are essentially unionized, right? And so I'm sure there's like a push and pull between like what the contracts say for the actors versus where the studios can work and how quickly the tech is developing that I'm not close enough to, but would be really interesting to understand. But I mean, in some ways, it's probably just the natural evolution because all movie stars really are sort of like handpicked and groomed and the narrative is set. So in many ways, it's sort of like artificially created character. And now you're just taking that one step further for public consumption.
One thing I'll say, because I got a package, a lot of packages when we came back, but as I was reading like Prime Day this year, did you guys get anything for Prime Day?
I missed Prime Day.
Yeah.
I didn't even. I don't even. They don't
I
even
sort of
advertise.
miss Prime
It's not
Day
even
too.
a big thing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like the lead up to it is so long now that you're like, wait, Prime Day still hasn't happened because you've been just seeing stuff for it. But I thought that it was slow, and I thought that in the beginning that there were a bunch of hot takes about how like people are turning against Amazon and that they're it's not working anymore. And then all of a sudden it was like, nope, biggest Prime Day in history. It's like, oh. So let's see, it's a $24 billion in online sales over 4 days. That's just in the U.S. too, which is insane to think about.
Angela, what else? What else are you watching?
My brother got engaged recently, and
Ooh.
he and his fiance had this discussion of whether she wanted like a larger diamond that was lab grown or one that was, I don't know if the term is real because technically
they're called natural diamonds.
Natural. Thank you. I was like, technically the lab grown diamonds are also real.
Oh my God, I'm obsessed with this. Yes.
And she was like, give me the bigger rock. And like, honestly, it is amazing how much cheaper it is. Like a tenth of the cost. And so I've just been browsing like religiously looking for it's our 10-year next year. So I've been preparing Zach for the size of diamond that I'm going to need for our 10.
Oh my gosh! Wait, so you have a natural one now, and now you're like, and since I'm open to, okay, I am tracking this so carefully because I think that sentiment is changing, like for sure. Like, can you imagine what the discussion is in the halls of De Beers or Tiffany's or wherever, because they really have to preserve their luxury and sort of status. And I think that's kind of the last leg it has to stand on because there's really nothing else. It's brand and like what we have already assigned the meaning to. We've already assigned meaning to a natural diamond.
Which I think behind that campaign was De Beers. The Diamonds Are Forever was a marketing campaign that De Beers started, and they kind of segmented diamonds as an engagement ring stone.
Totally. So, I mean, I think if you just track the stats, like, lab grown diamonds they're growing in market share every year. And I think it'll continue this trend for a long time. So we'll see. I mean, I am very pro natural diamond when it's like vintage, and I like people sort of, I think that's very romantic and cool too. But I'm pretty much on the camp, lab grown diamond camp.
I mean, I want those Kris Jenner like diamond earrings.
Oh, nice.
Like never afford them if they were like natural. So like, like the lab grown path allows me to.
Would you just wear them to work? Would you just wear them on the podcast? Just
gosh.
Hey guys.
That's a good question. Like, when would I ever wear them? That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay. Nice.
Well, I know we survived the A block without mentioning Windsurf, Cursor, or crazy AI salaries.
Mac would be so proud. Yeah.
But it did get us thinking about just the why behind why a lot of these founders go into technology, and then that transitioned us into a conversation around how did we all get into tech, and I think none of us had a really linear path. Actually, I learned this in this process of even this week that Helen, that you started in advertising, and so maybe this week we talk a little bit about how we got into tech and how we transitioned and some of the various life cycles we had before it. So
yeah, and why,
Helen,
we stay too, right? Because I think, we are excited to be here, but we're also, there's a lot that's changed. I think especially over the last, decade plus. So excited to talk about that too.
Yeah. So, Helen, you started in advertising. You worked at a traditional advertising agency, and then the Helen I know is the one who is super early in Facebook. And how was that transition, and how did you get into that?
Yeah. So a question I get is like, oh, how did you know you wanted a career in tech? What got you into tech marketing? And I was like, if I'm being honest, I wanted to work in advertising forever. I was like very intentional about it. Like straight out of school, I joined like a big advertising agency, Y&R. And, I moved to another shop. I got to do a Super Bowl commercial, which is like the holy grail of advertising. And I loved it. And I thought I would do that forever. And like advertising is definitely one of those careers where it's like a slope like this. You make nothing in the beginning and you have to pay your dues for like a decade. And then, then you like start making a lot of money. And so I was like on that path. And then in 2008, I will remember this day forever. It was like June 24th or something like that. And I remember it so vividly because it was like Chipotle buy one, get one day or something. But you
I
had
did not expect that you would say that.
Yes, exactly. Now I'm like, I want this to be visual, but there was a catch. Like you had to show up dressed as a burrito. So me and like 3 or 4 other, account executives.
Find the photo.
How do you dress up as a burrito? Like,
you take a lot of tinfoil in your like micro kitchen of your office.
I
You
remember
wrap each
this,
other in
actually.
tinfoil, and we like went and got our free burritos, and we like get up on the elevator. We're on the top floor, and it's like a movie scene where everybody is like typing in their passwords to like unlock their computers. And nobody can get in. And they're just looking at each other like, hey, are you locked out of your computer too? And like my desk was at the very, very far end of the office. And it was like a slow motion sort of like me getting to my desk to type in my password to see if I have been laid off. Because that is clearly what
While
was
you're
happening.
wrapped in tinfoil.
While I'm wrapped in tinfoil and holding a burrito, yes. And so I sit down, I was not laid off, and it was really only because I was working on like a revenue generating account that was fine. But we had some very big financial institutions, and they had all fallen, and I think they had cut their marketing budget. So it was just responsible for the agency to like pretty much let go of 75% of staff. So I was 25. And
Were you in New York at the time, or
I was in San Francisco? Yeah, I was 25. And it was bizarre, and I think that you hear about these things, right? I remember the .com bust, but I was in college, but this was like, oh, is this happening like right now? And that day I went home, and my roommate had just a friend from college who was over, who was like very early at Facebook, and he was like, hey, do you want to work at Facebook? Because we're hiring people who have advertising experience. And it was just like this perfect storm of whatever. And he's like, Sheryl Sandberg had just joined, and her whole story was about how she wanted to do brand advertising at Google, but never really got the chance. And at Facebook, she believes that Facebook will be the largest audience, and therefore brand dollars will move to Facebook, and there's an opportunity to present a product to the market that is the equivalent of television ads, and television ads were all I did. And so I remember going to my room and like printing my resume, like printing it and handing it to him, and he like handed it to the hiring manager the next day, and like I got a call. That is how, and then of course I got a job later, but like that was unexpected. A crazy confluence of a bunch of things that happened like within a week. And so you just never know. And of course, like I've been in tech ever since, and that was a very long time ago, but it was uncommon.
And how was it joining Facebook at that time? Because you've only worked at an advertising agency, very different structure. And then,
Asian parents, my parents were like, Facebook, why not Google, or something, so it felt very risky and crazy. And I think this is what is hard to imagine. But, like at the time, it didn't feel like I was going to go join a rocket ship. And people around me were not impressed that I was going to go join Facebook. Like even at the ad agency, I remember when I said I was leaving, they were like, are you crazy? You were saved. Like we spared you. We gave you a promotion in title only. And like it didn't feel like I'm joining this, inevitable thing. But remember at the time, we didn't have Twitter. Oh, we did, but it wasn't what it is now. And we didn't have all of this coverage to validate that like startups were the next big thing or that this was obvious. And so, yeah, I joined. It was like, I think low 700s or high 600s number of employees. So it was like, it wasn't super small. I think it was Series D. And we had healthcare or health benefits and basic things like that. But it was definitely scrappy. And the business side was very underdeveloped. And I don't know, it was awesome. But I had no basis of comparison. And I think the thing that I always say is like when that's your first foray into a venture-backed startup, that sets a very high bar. And if Zuck is your first example of a founder, again, very high bar. And, but that's sort of guided the rest of my career in tech. I kept looking for that. And, now I can say, I think that was a generational company and there was something very special about Facebook, especially at that time, that you just can't appreciate when you don't know anything else, right?
Yeah, I also wonder if like that mentality back in that era has shifted now because of, you see the things that happen at Windsurf, at the deals that happen, and you're starting to value, first of all, you feel like everything is a rocket ship, or everything for the first 6 months feels like a rocket ship. And so it feels more or less loyal to these companies maybe, or I wonder what the like barometer people are measuring against. And maybe like, I don't know, Helen, like if there was something that you learned from Facebook that you see parallel now.
Oh, that's a good question. I think that at the time, if you had asked every single person at Facebook when I joined, around the time that I joined, if they thought that they would work at Facebook, I don't think a single or a startup, I don't think a single person would have said yes. I think maybe actually, I take that back, a bunch of ad salespeople who were like early at Yahoo would have said yes. They were like, oh yeah, that was awesome. I want to do this again. Right? But I think everyone else sort of fell into it. And there wasn't this discourse of like, how joining a startup can be a very reasonable, career path or a way to get, for some people, get generational wealth. Like, I don't think that was something that people thought about. And so for the time, remember, it was like great financial crisis. We got a lot of people who like got laid off from Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, who were just like, I can code. Sure, I'll join this social media company, right? Like it was a lot of people whose plans went sideways who joined. And I think that was pretty unique, because now I think that when people join a startup, they're like, I've always wanted to work at a startup. Like I watch The Social Network. I've been reading TechCrunch since I was 10. Like it's like I think there's like it's become easier to sort of understand what this could look like as a career path, and a lot of people plan for it.
I think, Helen, like it's crazy to think of a time when Facebook didn't have an advertising business, sort of like now, like $150 billion later. But I think what was interesting about the wave of startups that we saw over the past, 15 years was the actual, like the business function had a lot of value to add, right? Like building out the advertising business, people with an advertising background, like figuring out that model was really important. And I think people were compensated for that, right? Sally's favorite, Nikesh, was like the highest person paid at Google. And he was a business guy. But I think what's different about this AI wave, which, not to bring it back to Windsurf and the events that have just happened, is I think most of the employees that were left behind at Windsurf were on the business side, because that's just less of a focus. Like monetization is actually more clear in some ways. Like these startups are generating money way earlier and at way higher scale than in previous cycles. And so much more of the value is ascribed to the technical talent. So I'm curious, as we go through the next 5 years, how that influences people like ourselves who don't come from that technical background in terms of thinking about joining a startup or their place in the tech ecosystem.
With Windsurf, what I was trying to figure out was like, they're saying business functions, but that could mean so many things, right? And like, But if it's sales, to me, that just makes sense. I mean, we had salespeople even from the very early days making $1 million a year because they were just killing it, right? Like Facebook was doing a really great job with ads, and that was cash that they could, invest in Bitcoin or whatever, and then do better than everyone else who's getting equity. So I don't know. I'm kind of torn on the whole like leaving the business functions behind. I think that is for some roles in particular, like sales, something that you like sign up for immediately. But not sure. No.
Angela, and I also learned this week that you grew up in Silicon Valley, which I thought I knew all about you, and I'm learning something new every day. And you had a more, I would say, traditional venture path, but how did you navigate that? And I assume if you joined around the financial crisis as well, right? And so like, how did that shape your thinking?
Helen, it's interesting to hear your story about what happened in your advertising company. I feel like millennials of our age cohort have all of this like generational trauma and from the great financial crisis. And I feel like from growing up in Silicon Valley, the .com bust was one as well because things were like really booming, and then all of a sudden things fell apart in very tangible ways for like average rank and file engineers who had, taken out credit card loans to really exercise their options, which were now totally underwater, or we've been paying taxes on equity that was now totally worthless. And you see some of those dynamics happen again. I was talking to a friend who works at a very highly valued private company, and he was saying like he is paying to work at this company because the taxes he's paying on his equity are more than he's getting paid in cash. And so like the hope is that the equity is worth something because you're negative cash flow today. And it's interesting to see those same signals, but the human impact was really real for the people that lived here. And then to go through that again, just a few years later in the financial industry, I think just puts you in a little bit of a different mindset. But my version of Helen's story is, I think this must have been 6 weeks or 8 weeks after we started at Goldman in the summer of 2008. So this was already after the fall of Bear Stearns, and right when Lehman was collapsing. They called all of the first year analysts who, you're just a few months out of college into a town hall meeting, and then basically summarily cut a quarter of the people or move them to different orgs. And, these are very high achieving, high functioning people who gave up other like options to be here. And so it was very jarring to see people at the start of their career think that they're on one trajectory and get moved to another. Now, most of those people are very smart and talented and figured it all out, but it was just very crazy to see. And it gives me a lot of empathy for what employees at a lot of tech companies must be feeling now with I think Sally, you called it the rug pull of what's been happening around corporate change. And so I got pulled back because one of the staffers I worked with at Goldman had joined SoftBank, and he was looking to hire someone on his team. And so I think we often say the world is small and your journeys are long. So 10 years later, we were reunited at SoftBank.
Cool. Because in between you did private equity, but you weren't focusing on tech.
I did private equity. I focused on a bunch of different industries. I worked on cruise lines. I worked on hospitals, but I actually did a little bit of a deep dive on Web 1.0 companies. And it's funny to think about it. I always laugh because we looked at eHarmony, and I remember we were going through our investment committee decision, and we were talking about online dating and, what online dating was. And this is when there weren't really many free options and you had to answer all these questions. And people were just like, oh, but, why would people want to date online? And it was this foreign concept. But, 10 years later, it's sort of the de facto way that people are dating. So it's like interesting to see over even just the journey in my own career, how quickly tech trends can change.
Sally, how'd you get into tech?
Well, actually, the financial crisis is how I got into tech. Before then, I started a career in journalism. I always thought that I wanted to be a war correspondent, like many naive young journalists that want to go into the industry. And so,
is that what Christiane Amanpour did?
Exactly. That's the person I thought of as well. I picture Sally in some golf, sort of.
Yeah.
Yes, location.
It was such a
you look amazing. You look so good. Yes. Yes.
But you know when the reality settles in is when you realize that, oh, in your young 20s, you're going to have to move to Syria or the Middle East somewhere and, spend your majority of your 20s there. And then it was, I did intern for Anderson Cooper. I interned at MSNBC. I did actually start a major or double major in poli-sci and journalism because I thought this was the career I wanted to take. And then I was in college when financial crisis hit, and I was like, what the hell is this? I was living in New York City at the time. Majority of my friends were in finance, and I didn't know what an equity or a stock or a bond was at the time, but then somehow got an internship after some prep at CNBC, and then joined Bloomberg. I joined Bloomberg right out of college and then worked at CNBC for a decade. And so as part of my like coverage, I did more of like macro. I started by covering IMF, World Bank, and then more banks, and then M&A, and that's how I got into tech at a time where we were starting to cover more IPOs, and we weren't doing a ton of private market coverage at the time. And one of the big IPOs we covered was Alibaba, and before it went public, obviously it was a huge, massive company out in China. Before then, we hadn't really spoken about Alibaba before, and so Jack Ma and Joe Tsai, who the two senior executives, came into the office. We had to do this whole explainer, and then we pitched this concept of, hey, we should cover private companies a little bit sooner because you don't want to just introduce a whole new company vertical days before the IPO. Again, this like sounds so obvious now, but at the time we were so focused on public markets and stock picking, and I think like how people, what they get out of CNBC or various business news has obviously shifted because of the amount of information that are out there. And so that's how I got into tech, and then I pitched this show idea called now it's called Squawk Alley, which is a tech show on the network. Again, like not a like novel idea now, but at the time having like a tech dedicated show was an interesting pitch. Then I moved to San Francisco in 2017, right around when like Airbnb and Uber and all these companies were going public, and I wanted to be at the center of the action. I didn't know a ton of people. And then expanded my network there. I will say, though, transitioning from an editorial side of covering tech and exposure to tech, and then actually going into an operating role in tech was definitely a more challenging journey than I thought. So I think like a lot of people in journalism, or even now, especially now, actually. Because unfortunately the size of the industry is getting smaller, so there's a lot of layoffs, and so a lot of my colleagues are looking to transition into tech, and so have asked me for various advice. And frankly, it's not very a linear path in that either. You can't just transition from an editorial role to like let's say a BD role, even though a lot of it is around storytelling and of course deal making. But I did actually end up joining United Masters, which is a music tech platform that's backed by Andreessen, because of my relationship that I had, or I knew some of the partners there during my CNBC days. But it wasn't a very easy like transition. We spoke almost a year before I joined, and then I was overseeing BD and partnerships, and then took on corp dev role where I got exposure to more of the deal making side of things, which again I had no experience, so I kind of learned it on the job. I think one important thing is just like framing the story of what you've learned, and we can definitely get into that as another topic. But yeah, definitely not a linear path, and definitely not an easy transition as I think people expect from journalism to tech, and we see it in various forms.
That's super interesting. Like so I taught a class for Northwestern School of Journalism. Like so, Medill has like a West Coast campus, and there's this class that I called Careers in Tech. Right, basically they want to take a bunch of journalism majors in both their undergraduate and master's programs, and like kind of prepare them that a lot of the jobs that you thought that you might be graduating into no longer exist, right? It was very smart of them to do this. And so a lot of what I had to sort of talk about was like, how do you transfer that storytelling skill? But also like one that when you were talking, Sally, I was reminded of was, I think when you're a journalist, you are right with the subject, right? You are exposed. The names that you were just sharing like are incredible. And every day you're like meeting with Fortune 500 executives and like heads of state and like, you know, all these things. And then if you think about like what a content strategy role is buried within a marketing team of Google, right? It's like you have a very different day to day, and the people that you interact with on a day to day basis are not heads of state, right? So it's just sort of, I think that I did not realize that transition on like kind of
it's a tough transition.
Imagining what your day to day and who you are interacting with and who you're talking to turned out to be like one of the biggest sort of like leaps for a lot of these folks. But I was just reminded of that when you were talking. Yeah.
I think that's a good transition, by the way, to our rapid fire. Helen, do you want to take it away?
Okay, so this week we got a question. It says, I live in SF and I just got offered a role at one of the big AI companies to work in London. I want to stay in the tech ecosystem. Should I move? Ooh, okay, so assume that it's a very well-funded, large, maybe model company that has offices all around the world, or they're building a presence in London. Should I move? I don't know. I guess I feel like I really want to stay in the tech ecosystem. And I know, Sally, you've spent a lot more time in London, but I've spent some time in London too. And just the tech ecosystem is very different. And so I think when people move away from Silicon Valley, whether that's just to New York or anywhere else, they'll say like, oh, you're not at HQ, right? Like you feel it. I think London is like even more so. And I think there's like a lot of good things that come with that. Like the tech community feels smaller. It's very, well networked, and you feel like you can get a lot of things done, and people are very close. And it's less competitive and sharp elbowed. But I feel like if you want to, sort of be at the forefront of what is happening, still being in SF is probably the best thing. Although there are like so many reasons to move to London. It's such a beautiful place, and there are interesting people and proximity to every other European city.
I think also it depends on the role, right? If it's more like region specific,
right? Or you're opening up, the UK presence, or you're like trying to build relationships across Europe for expansion. Like that seems really like objective driven. Yeah.
And to your point about the like smaller office, I felt that when I was the bureau chief, and you go from this like huge company org to all of a sudden you're like a satellite office, and it's a very different dynamic. And then you create your own relationships, but then you are removed from HQ, so it does get challenging. But
well, can I say something as like a hiring manager, or like people who, when you're scanning resumes, and I'll just use Facebook as an example. Not today, because Facebook's massive and they're everywhere or whatever. But for a while, like when I was at Dropbox or Plaid or whatever, we look at somebody's resume and they worked at Facebook, but they worked at one of the satellite offices, we'd be like, nah. Like, I'm serious. Yeah. Like that was like a thing. It was factored in. So, I don't know why. I think maybe we thought that we assumed that the hiring bar was different, that you wouldn't be exposed to the executives at HQ. So I don't know. Like I feel like transparency around stuff like this is valuable. So I think about that too. I'm using Facebook as an example at a specific time. I don't think that's always the case. But yeah, I just remember that.
But hey, I'm open to a London taping sometime soon. So yes. Great chat on the road.
All right. Good
All right.
To cut.
See you next week.
Bye. Bye.